Good morning, kiddos. So today we're really going to talk about cells. So there's two different types of cells, two really big categories of cells, and we're going to talk about both of those. So the first that we're going to deal with is going to be something called a prokaryote. So a prokaryote, let's just break down the word first, because this is sometimes better for me if I can look at a word and kind of get some meaning from it, and that kind of tells me something. So the first part is going to be pro, and then we've got the second part called carry. So pro, what the word pro or the prefix pro means is before. So in Greek, you say pro, and that means that came before something anyway. Carry, and that's K-A-R-Y, my crazy handwriting here, carry means kernel. So you can kind of think of some things that come in kernels. So you've got kernels that are nuts, you've got a kernel of corn, and scientists, when they first discovered these cells, they had already discovered another type of cell that we're going to talk about in a moment called a eukaryote, but they had said, these are really small little things. These are cells that don't have a kernel, and in this case, what the kernel was a nucleus. And so a nucleus is going to be something that's kind of look like a kernel. They didn't know what it was. You got to understand, this happened a very long time ago. I say very long time ago. I actually don't know what exact year they discovered these ideas, or these images, and they used a microscope to do it. But it was quite a while, and you got to understand, these people had no idea what cells were at that point. They had some inclinations, but they did. I shouldn't say they didn't have an idea, but they didn't know for certain. The other type of cell is going to be a eukaryote. And you and I are eukaryotes, and we're going to talk about these parts of the word. So we got EU, and then we've got carry again. So EU means true, and carry, again, means kernel. And I'm going to draw this kernel out in a moment and show you what kind of looks like. So true, meaning that it truly had a kernel. It had a nucleus, and I'll draw it for you in a moment. But there's going to be times in your education that you're going to encounter these words again, especially these prefixes pro and eu. So let me give you some other examples of this, where this word has been used. So different words with you. One of them would be eustress. So we have eustress. So you and stress, and we all know what stress is. Stress is going to be something that kind of motivates you to do something, right? You're going to be have the stress of having to take out the trash or make dinner. You've got to get that done. So in this case, this is true stress. And eustress is good stress. It's good because think about if you didn't have stress to get up and go to school in the morning, you wouldn't. And if you didn't go to school, you wouldn't move forward in your life. If you didn't have enough stress from your coach trying to get you to perfect a certain play, maybe you need to run an inside route in football. If you didn't have the stress of wanting to do well, you would never do it. So you could think of stress in three different ways. You could think of, you got overstress, and you're overstressed. You've got eustress, and you've got you're understressed. And understressed would be like you're so unmotivated that you never do anything. Everybody takes care of everything for you. So these might be some people that are super wealthy, and they were born wealthy, and they didn't have to accumulate this wealth. They're not really motivated to do a lot. They just kind of hang out and don't do much. This is good stress. This is where we want to be. We want to be at this point. It's true stress. It's good stress. Motivates you to do what you need to do. You learn. You get better at life. Those types of things. And overstress is a problem. Overstress is not what we want. Overstress is where you kind of collapse because you're so consumed with all the things that you need to do that you can't make a move. You're just stuck. And that's not the kind of things that we want. So there's those two categories of cells, and we're going to go through those one by one. So the first one I'm going to do is going to be eukaryotes. So let's just make a T-chart really quick. Make a T-chart, make sure I'm still recording. Yep. So we're going to put prokaryotes over here. Prokaryotes. And then we've got eukaryotes. And what could be a eukaryote and what could be a prokaryote? Sorry about my handwriting here. So prokaryote's going to be, there's really only two. There's one called an archaea, and we'll get into that later, but there's one called an archaea, and it's like a bacteria. It's an archaea bacteria. And there's another one that's called a eubacteria. And I will refer to eubacteria as just your common old beat up bacteria. Those are the kinds of things that are going to probably give you diseases, give you bronchitis, give you strep throat. There's a lot of different categories under this. But right now, just for what we're doing, we just want to keep it on these two categories, archaea and eubacteria. Under eukaryotes, holy smoke, there's a lot. You could think of eukaryotes as being plants. You could think of them, not think of, but there's other examples would be animals. There's fungi, so if you find a fungus in your yard, that would be a eukaryote. And there's another one called Protista. And this is a weird category. And when we get to taxonomy, we'll deal with protists. They are the strangest group. So these are your big categories of organisms, and everything that's alive that we know of at this point falls under these categories. So prokaryotes and eukaryotes, those are our two big domains of life. And then here we have these categories underneath it. I've got archaea and eubacteria. They fall under this domain, which is prokarya. And then you've got eukaryotes, that's us. Here we would be, we're animals. Some people say, really, we're animals? I was like, yeah, well, you're not a mushroom. You're not a fungus, a slime mold. You're not a plant. If you're a plant, please let me know. I want to figure that out. That would be really interesting. You wouldn't have to, you would not, going back to eustress, Jesus, you'd be under stress. You wouldn't have to do much other than just hang out and get water. You can make food just from laying out in the sunshine. And then we got protists. These are our big categories that fall under eukarya or eukaryotes, and they're interchangeable words. And I guess I should write that up here. So there's eukaryote. It means the same thing, just like feo and ugly mean the same thing. Eukarya, eukaryotes. Okay, I'm gonna do a little more here. Put that to the side. We'll come back to that in a moment. So I want to compare and contrast these things, but first I want to draw them for you. So eukaryotes, they're the most complex. We'll draw them first. So a eukaryote, when you're looking at it just as a cell, I mean, if I draw me, I'm going to draw multiple cells. And maybe we should really kind of talk about what that looks like in terms of a level of organization as first. So let's kind of start there. So in levels of organization, in at least biological systems, you start with atoms, and atoms are going to go to molecules. They build molecules, multiple atoms together, and molecules will build biomolecules. Biomolecules can build organelles, and we're going to spend some time talking about organelles in just well, I don't have enough room to write organelles here. Let me see if I can write that smaller. Organelles. And organelles, that just means small, and organs, so small organs. And then from there, from organelles form cells. And then cells are going to form tissues. Those are groups of cells working together. And then tissues build, or multiple tissues working together builds an organ. And organs working together make organ systems. And then organ systems working together make organisms. So you and I are organisms made of organ systems that work together to make organisms, and organs working together to make organ systems make organisms, and groups of tissues working together make organs. Groups of cells that are very similar or the same work together to make tissues. Organelles that are very different make cells. They work together to make that cell function. Biomolecules are what the organelles are made of, and biomolecules are going to be made of molecules, and molecules are made of atoms. Now it gets a little larger than that. We can go all the way from organ systems make populations. So there's different populations of organisms, and they're of the same species, not different species, different populations, different species, groups of populations of different species make communities. And different communities are going to form ecosystems. And different ecosystems can make biomes, and biomes ran out of room here. I'll put it over here on this board. Different biomes are going to make a biosphere. A biosphere is going to be the Earth. So let's start over here. We'll make it, this is Europe, this is Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, subcontinent of Asia. This is Asia. Maybe you can see over here there's South America, and just a little bit, well, let's make Florida here. That's Florida, and that's going to be North America. But this is a biosphere. So biosphere. And again, a sphere is just a ball, right? So the Earth kind of looks like a ball. It's a sphere, and it's made partly of life. So it's the only planet that we absolutely know of at this point that has life. It's very likely there are other planets that are biospheres as well, but not all planets are going to be biospheres. Like, it's very unlikely, if you think about our solar system and what that's like. The Mercury's really close to the sun. It's very hot on one side and pretty cold on the other, but it doesn't rotate. So it's probably not a biosphere, but our planet is a biosphere. So we're gonna come back to this and draw these cells and talk about what they look like and how they're put together. Let me erase this so we have a clean slate, so to speak. And this is literally a clean slate because these are little slates that I'm writing on. All right. Okay, so let's see, you guys, let's get you back here. So I'm going to draw a eukaryote because they're the most complex. So let's just start with the hard and work to the easy. And it's really not hard anyway. It's a pretty simple idea. So I'm going to draw a eukaryote. Eukaryotes are really simple. So I'm going to start with a cell membrane. And I'm going to, obviously this isn't to scale. Cells are a lot smaller than this. This would be a cell membrane, and I'll write that over here to the side. Cell membrane. And a membrane is just kind of like a skin. It's a surrounding. If you have a membrane on something, it'd be like a package. So like if you have a package, a cellophane package that surrounds an item that you buy, you have to break that membrane to get inside. So it surrounds it. Next, let's just draw the most obvious one, the one that you're probably all familiar with, that you've been thinking about, that kernel. So when scientists looked at cells through a microscope, what that thing was that they saw, that true kernel, was this, and that's the nucleus. The nucleus has DNA in it. I'm going to try to draw a terrible... My light just went out, but I guess you guys can still see this. It has DNA inside, and we'll get into detail about the nucleus later, but this is the nucleus. Nucleus. And surrounding the nucleus is another organelle. These are all organelles, right? So these are just the little parts that make the cell. So surrounding that is going to be something called an endoplasmic reticulum. And you probably heard of I'm not saying bacteria, a giraffe. And a giraffe, they said reticulated giraffe. And those are going to be reticulated. They have that pattern that kind of looks like this. They're all patchy. So this is the endoplasmic, and I'll break that word down as well. Endoplasmic reticulum. So endo, meaning inside, plasm, it's made of a membrane too. It's got a little surrounding, and that surrounding is made of something called lipids. Examples of lipids would be oils, waxes, trying to think what else, oils, waxes, and so goodness gracious, trying to think of the other one. I can't think of it at the moment. It's drawing a blank here. But you can imagine that water can't pass through it very easily. It's, if you've got oil and something, it can't move through it very easily. So water and oil separate. So you've got endoplasmic reticulum surrounding the nucleus. Outside of that is another organelle called a Golgi body. And there's a lot of Golgi bodies. And I'll put that term over here. And I hope you guys can see it. I'll look in a second. So Golgi body. It's also called a Golgi apparatus. Either term will be just fine. It doesn't make any difference. So Golgi body, nucleus, cell membrane, endoplasmic reticulum. The only thing here that's not really an organelle is the cell membrane, because it's on the outside. Everything on the inside is an organelle. This is just a cellular structure. These are independent organelles that work together. And the cell membrane isn't necessarily, actually an organelle inside of a cell. It does have to be inside of a cell to be an organelle. We also have, and I was just thinking about this, there's two different categories of endoplasmic reticulum. You've got smooth and you've got rough. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make this rough. I'll leave this one smooth. So I've got rough endoplasmic reticulum, and there's these little dots on them. And these little dots are proteins. And these proteins are going to be what we call ribosomes. Awesome. These little dots here are called ribosomes. So I'll bring that over here. So these are called ribosomes. Somes, by the way, means body. We've got so far ribosomes. They make protein. They use a code in the nucleus that's coded over here to make protein. These proteins are packaged by the endoplasmic reticulum. They're sent to a Golgi apparatus, and they're modified even further to be a functional protein. And I'm going to get to that on another lesson. And then we've got cell membranes that close it. And so far, I think that we've got it all that I've drawn thus far. Let's see what else we can draw here. I'm colorblind, so I'm struggling with my colors. I think this is green. It doesn't say so, but I think it is. Okay, so there's other organelles that are inside of eukaryotes as well. There's one, if you're a plant, you're going to have organelles that look kind of like this. They're green because they have chlorophyll, but they're called chloroplast. And they've got this little area inside them. They've got two membranes. They're really tripped out. they've got two membranes. They got another membrane inside, so they've got two compartments, an inner compartment and an outer compartment. And don't worry about it at the moment. You don't really need to know that. We'll have a whole unit where we study this. So these, if you're a plant and some protists, you're going to have chloroplast. Chloroplasts. And so chloroplasts are going to make food. So CO2 and water make sugar and oxygen. And we get all the oxygen you've ever breathed in your life. Everything. You totally depend on plants to be able to, and some protists, to be able to give you the oxygen that you need to breathe. Without them, you're doomed. You're dead. You can't make it. And then we'll go to, finally, I'll use red again. And red is going to be my mitochondria. And mitochondria look very similar to chloroplasts. If I were to zoom in on this chloroplast, there's even other structures that I can't really draw for this video that are in there. But they have this also inner membrane as well. So they have two membranes. And these are mitochondria. And I'll draw that right here. Mitochondria. People call them the powerhouse of the cell. And to me, that's a little Mickey Mouse to use. And when you're in high school, they're so much cooler than a powerhouse of the cell. They do give you the energy that you need in order to function, but they don't just give you energy out of nowhere. They convert it. So you eat food, and these organelles, when these little molecules of food get broken down in your digestive system, they get put in your blood, and they take sugars from what you eat, and they convert it into something called ATP. And don't worry about that yet. You don't need to know it. We're just going to deal with what these things are and how they look and what they look like. So I'm going to look at it a little more closely, and let's think about this. We'll work our way from the outside to the inside. So I have a cell. This is a eukaryote. It's a very complex cell. It's a karyote. We say it's karyote because you can see this kernel, and you can see this is the biggest organelle that there is. It's a nucleus. So when they looked through their really cheesy microscopes, when they saw, this they saw this nucleus most easily. It's bigger than, at least than all these other organelles. And they could see it. So that you go through the outside, the cell membrane, and then let's just jump to the interior and work our way out. So I've got this nucleus. It has DNA in it. That DNA has a coded message to give you all of your traits. And then we come to two different endoplasmic reticulum. So I've got endoplasmic reticulum here. That's going to be whatever color. I think this is a pink. This pink or gray color. And it's got ones with little dots on it are the rough endoplasmic reticulum. It's rough because it looks like it's got little bumps on it, and it does. And those little bumps are called ribosomes, and they make proteins that you need. And everything that is a really hardcore structure that causes reactions is going to be a protein. And then you've got smooth endoplasmic reticulum. There's proteins made here that are shifted over here, and they break down bad things in your body. And these smooth endoplasmic reticulum does. And that is a really cool, important organelle, because if you take in toxins, you need to be able to break down those toxins, and you can break it down with smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Let's see, from there I got Golgi apparatus or Golgi bodies, and my Golgi bodies are going to be this orange. The proteins that are made here aren't complete. They're just sort of complete. You can imagine like a car being made. And a car being made isn't fully complete until maybe after it's had its seats put in, it's had its wheels put on, it's got a gas cap, it's got windshields. This is the basic frame of the car, maybe the engine, but it doesn't have all the extra parts on it. So a Golgi apparatus will take those whatever proteins made here and modify it and make it really nice. To get the energy to do any of this, you have to eat. But that food is too big to break down in your cells. You would literally explode. There's so much energy in that. So you have to break it down and release that energy in little small bits. little small increments. So the Golgi apparatus and all the other parts that have to use energy to make these proteins, to synthesize new DNA, that's going to come from mitochondria that takes food in and breaks it down really small. If you're a plant, then you've got chloroplasts. If this was a human cell or an animal cell or a fungus, we don't have chloroplasts, but chloroplasts take in light and carbon dioxide and convert it into water and oxygen. Those are the basic organelles that you really need to start knowing and thinking about whenever you start thinking about biology, you start to learn biology. This is a good place to start. There's a lot more going on here than just this, but this is my nice little kind of a cartoon version of a eukaryote. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make or draw a prokaryote. Prokaryote's really simple. Let's make sure you can see it. So I got a prokaryote. Before nucleus. So when I draw one, I'm probably not going to draw one with the nucleus. Not probably, I'm not going to draw one with the nucleus. So I'll just kind of draw it. And there's a lot of different varieties of these cells. They kind of look a lot of different ways. And again, I'm not going to draw this to scale. I'm going to draw it to scale in just a moment. But it does have that same thing. You do have to have a cell membrane. Every cell has a cell membrane. And cell membranes have other words. There's a lot of words in biology. And this would be also known as a plasma membrane. They mean the same thing. Inside of that, you don't have that nucleus, but you've got, all cells have to have some sort of DNA. So there is DNA in there, and that DNA is all in one little region. And this is DNA, and it's in a region called a nucleoid. They say it's sort of like a nucleus, but it's not. All of these organelles here, remember, have that membrane around them, a plasma membrane around them. These do not. This doesn't. There's no little plasma membranes in here. You have DNA, and we also say that it's naked DNA. It doesn't have a membrane around it, so it's naked. It's naked in quotation marks. It's naked DNA. It doesn't have, it's not dressed with a membrane. After that, the only thing that they really have in common, once that's are these ribosomes. And it does have a lot of ribosomes. They have to make protein. Everything that you have to have reactions to be able to be alive. So they also have ribosomes, but you'll notice that they are not on an endoplasmic reticulum. So on a eukaryote, you would have these ribosomes on the endoplasmic reticulum, whereas in a prokaryote, they're not. And that's really basically it. You've got these real three things, these simple things that prokaryotes have in common with eukaryotes, is that they've got a DNA, a cell membrane, and ribosomes. That's the big basic similarities between these two. One other thing that I think is kind of cool is to also draw these to scale. To draw something to scale means that you try to show what it actually looks like in terms of its size. So if I were to draw a eukaryote, so I'm going to draw a eukaryote over here. So this will be my eukaryote. And over here I'm going to draw a prokaryote, a little dinky old prokaryote. So if I draw a eukaryote, and just to give it scale, remember it's big, it's got a nucleus, it's got endoplasmic reticulum, it's got a Golgi apparatus, it's got, if it's a plant, it's got chloroplasts in it, and I'm not going to worry about coloring them. The point of this is just, it's got, let's see, endoplasmic reticulum is that smooth and rough, so we'll make this rough, we'll make this smooth. I've got the ribosomes that are here that are really nice. I've got mitochondria. If let's say all eukaryotes have mitochondria. I've got my cell membrane. Let's think. What else am I missing here? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is about right for right now. We'll leave it at that. Now, a prokaryote is going to be about this size. That's literally it. They're tiny compared to eukaryotes. And when we get further into this, you'll know why. So I've got a prokaryote as well. It's a really small little organism compared. In fact, if you were to compare them, which organelles do they seem like they're about the same size to? Or even have a similar shape? Let me draw the DNA in here while you're thinking about that. Oh, you're right. They're about the same size as a mitochondria and a chloroplast. And there's a reason for that. And these have ancestors. Their ancestors were prokaryotes. It's a weird thing that we'll learn about later. But this kind of gives you an idea of size in trying to give it to scale. So prokaryotes tend to be really small. They're smaller than eukaryotes. And eukaryotes are going to tend to be bigger. They're much larger. That's the reason we found out about these guys first. We learned about these eukaryotes first because they were bigger and technology wasn't sufficient enough to really see these very easily. So we discovered eukaryotes, and then later we discovered prokaryotes, even though prokaryotes, they came before. So these are older. These have been around a lot longer than eukaryotic life. Eukaryotic life hasn't been around near as long as prokaryotic life. These are, in terms of newer in time scale, these are more recent. These are much older. This is ancient life. It's still here. I mean, obviously we still have bacteria, but these evolved and came about a lot later. So eukaryotes arose from prokaryotes, and they arose through a pretty cool process. All right, that's that first little lesson.